I believe if you're listening to this, you're that one parent, teacher, therapist. You're that one human for this challenging kid. I think that's the goal here, to help our kids love themselves and to help them be compassionate towards themselves so they can be compassionate towards others and know that they are not alone in this world. Hey everyone, it is Dayna here, and welcome to the very first episode of the Calm the Chaos Parenting Podcast. I am joined not by myself. I've actually got a guest with me.
A guest?
Well, I mean, you're a little more than a guest.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So my name is Jason Abraham. If you guys don't know me, I am Dayna's spouse, also business partner.
Partner in crime.
Partner in crime. I was thinking the same thing.
In all things.
Yeah, I'm like the man behind the scenes.
Yeah, AKA Lemon Pickle.
Yes, everyone loves to call me Lemon Pickle.
Yeah, that's a story for another episode.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So you guys are going to have to let us know if we should call him Lemon Pickle or if you want to know the story.
The Lemon Pickle origin story.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So we have been asked to start a podcast for so long, and here we are, we're doing it. I don't even know. This might get cut. I don't know if you're going to hear this.
A confetti cannon?
I feel like we do. I feel like we need a confetti cannon. We talked a long time. Do we want it to be serious? Do we want to be all sciencey? Or do we want to just be real life? And I think this is what we're going for.
Real life it is.
Yeah, I think so. So full of shenanigans. We believe that parenting should be fun. And yeah, it's hard some days. And it's a holy hot mess. And we don't have it all figured out. And so we're just here to kind of share our journey. And also, the format's going to be different each week. We don't know. Sometimes we'll do interviews and
we just got to find our way.
Yeah, and sometimes it'll be just me. Sometimes it might just be just Jason. And we'll just see how it goes from here.
Whoa, just Jason.
Oh, no.
The possibilities.
I don't know if I should give you the keys.
So we're here today, right? Like, I think we want to know kind of like, who the heck is Dayna Abraham, right? Okay. Like, what's the origin story? Like, where did you come from, right? It seems like you came out of nowhere, but like the nitty gritty, right? I think that's what people want to know.
I think a lot of people want to know, one, how did I get into this mess in the first place? And I get asked all the time. So it really did start I was a national board certified teacher. My favorite kids were the kids that came with a paper trail behind them, and all the parents of these kids, they came with their head hung. The kids knew it. All the other teachers knew it, and you got warned about them in the teacher's lounge. But they were my favorites. And I think it's because I was a little quirky. I was a little out of the box growing up. My older brother, he is bipolar. And so I was the sibling of a very explosive sibling. And so I think I just was built for this. And so when I had my own kid, and just to be clear, guys, we are a blended family. So for those of you that don't know. And so when I had my first kid, I'm not slighting Jason.
Like it was just me. I did all the work.
All
you
on
did
my
nothing.
own. No. So when I had my first kid, I really figured I had this parenting gig figured out. I figured I was going to be the world's best parent. But I think the universe.
How did that turn out for you?
Yeah. I think the universe played a really, really big joke on me.
Yeah. And I think everybody who doesn't have a child thinks that they're going to be the best parent ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I have the best. I was the best parent until I became a parent. And
until I had my own child.
Yeah, until I had my own. And so for the first 7 years, I felt like an absolute, utter failure.
Yeah. So, like a lot happened in between, let's say like year 0 of parenting and like year 7. Yeah. Now, this would be a very, very long podcast, right? If we were to fill like all the pages. But
year 7's the big one.
I think that's kind of where we're headed, right? Yeah. Is, let's kind of like cue into like where this was born, like sort of where Calm the Chaos was born.
Yeah. And so I needed to cue up to where we were. And year 7 is up until this point, my son had been kicked out of preschool, kindergarten, first grade. He was, by second grade, he was kicked out of school more days than he was actually in school. And so at this point, it was pretty evident, even with getting, IEPs and different services, it was evident that the traditional school setting just was not working for him.
Sure. And, I wasn't in the picture as like a dad figure, in his life at that point. But like thinking back on it, right, you recapping of like he was kicked out of preschool, he was kicked out of kindergarten, right? Like it's starting to remember like those pieces when you're that young, you can kind of say like, oh, he was just doing this. He was just doing that. Like there's easy ways to point out like how young he is or like how immature he is that, can kind of like, I don't know, like I want to use the word excuse just for lack of a better word, like excuse the behavior that's happening. But like by the time he was in, I think it was second grade, it was like, okay, like this is not just like young, like what's going on here? What can we do?
Was that one day where we were together at this point. I was pregnant with our daughter and I was 9 months pregnant. I got a call from school and they were like, you need to come now. He's having another meltdown. We can't control it. And so when I walked into the school, he was surrounded by every adult in the building possible. Plus they had called the police on him. Now remember, he's 7 years old and they had him kind of caged in this glassed in room in the office. So everyone was looking at him and the entire staff just put their hands in the air. They were like, we don't know what happened. It just came out of nowhere. Now, I know that these teachers were trying their best. I know that they were doing the best they had with what they had because I was that teacher before. Yeah. And I was still teaching at that time.
Sure.
And so at that point, when I got led into the principal's office and she sat me down and she gave me two options. She was like, you either need to never bring him back until you figure out exactly what's wrong with him, which BT dubs, that is totally illegal.
Highly illegal, right? We don't, hey, principals, if you're listening, don't use that maneuver, right?
So that's a whole nother episode too on advocating for your kid and your rights. But the second thing she said is, or let this kind gentleman take your son. And she was pointing to the police officer and she was basically saying that he could get arrested for his behavior. And it was just really evident at that point that we needed to do something different.
I'm still baffled. What was the police officer going to do?
I don't know, but you know how many times.
I know. It's just like what I'm trying to imagine this grown Chicago police officer like escorting a 7-year-old to the squad car. Like I just don't see it happening.
But it was multiple times. I mean, it happened all the way up until junior high. It went in different school settings. So I quit my job. I decided to homeschool him. And at that point, we were dealing with, massive meltdowns at home, massive meltdowns at school. We were dealing with broken dishes and toys and holes in the wall. And I was trying and we were trying anything and everything possible. And we were trying therapies and we were trying positive parenting and we were trying strict parenting and we were trying like all the
everything
things
under the sun.
Everything under the sun. Things that I'm embarrassed to even say that I did and things that I felt like I should have known better how to handle them.
Yeah. So that was actually going to be my next question was like, you are a national board certified teacher. Yeah. You were like an award-winning, Chicago school teacher. You had early childhood education like on lock by all means, right? Mm-hmm. But like here's your kiddo who is just like he's fooling everyone. Like he's breaking all the rules, all the systems, all the processes. How did that make you feel?
I mean, like I said, I felt like I was the worst parent in the world. I felt completely alone. I was ashamed. I felt guilty, like somehow I caused this. And it was other people would tell me that I caused this and that if I just did this, if I just did that, if I just tried this, if I just tried that. And so I was completely lost and overwhelmed. And at that point, he was starting to notice as well that other people, that he wasn't like others and that he was getting in trouble. And it was really starting to weigh on his self-esteem.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that.
And he said things like, I wish I was dead. I wish I could just be like everybody else. And that's a 7-year-old saying those things.
Right. Which is pretty much just like knife in the heart.
Oh, it just breaks your mama heart. Right. And so at that point, when we brought him home and I decided to quit teaching, and guys, I am not one of those people who grew up saying, I want to be a homeschool mom, right? I have friends who were phenomenal homeschoolers. That was not me. I love teaching. I did not love homeschooling. And so I did it against my will, but I did it because I knew he needed something completely non-traditional.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At this point in the story, like I've stepped in, like I'm playing the dad role, like I'm still like new and I'm stepdad, like, you know, I'm doing, so you were ruling the roost here, right? Like you were running the show because you were like primary parent.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, you know, we have people all the time ask us like, how do you do this if you don't have a spouse on board or if you don't have a partner that can help? And at that point, you didn't know what to do and you weren't fully on board.
Well, sure. Like how many people expect a 7-year-old to say things like, I want to kill myself, right? Like you just like,
or I want to kill you.
Right. Or I want to kill you, or I hate you, or whatever. Like you don't see it coming, right? Like as somebody who's like stepping into parenting, right? That's just not something that you imagine happening.
Yeah. What my number one goal, I had 2 goals when we brought him home. And that was number 1, I didn't want him to hate himself for not fitting in because I knew that he could turn that anger and that hate inward on himself and hurt himself. And then I didn't want him to hate the world for not understanding him because I knew that or blame others. And I knew that if that was the case, he'd be much like my brother and he'd turn that anger outward and then it would be really destructive behavior. And so I didn't want that.
You know, and I think anger is definitely like a big part of his journey, right? Yeah. He's having to learn how to manage his stress and it comes out as anger and aggression. So, you know, I think we've painted like a pretty decent picture of like what life was like, why we sort of like had this setup where like you stopped working and, you know, at CPS, you had that luxury, right? Where I had a full-time job. I was making, you know, pretty decent money. So we were able to survive just on my one income. And then we had you come home, right? We had our together child, right? Our daughter. And
just for anyone listening, we consider all of them our children.
No.
But you know, as I know, I started.
You're the one who started it.
I did. By saying my kid, our kid. Whatever.
Yeah, guys, absolutely, right? Like they're 100% my kids. I've had them for 10 plus years now, right? Like just for sake of factual evidence is what we're going for. So, right, we had our daughter, and how did we go about like? You know, I think you remember more than I do because at this point, I think I was just trying to like fix the turtle tank or survive or, you know.
Yeah, I remember. So I remember handing you "Explosive Child" by Ross Greene at the time.
I did read that,
and it was just, you know, for all of the parents out there who are doing all of the research, and then you're handing research, and you're handing books and resources to your other partner and expecting them to just jump on board. Oh gosh, how did that feel?
Well, so it's funny because, you know, at the time, right, like I was working, you know, at the Board of Trade. I had a tech job, right? And like, that was my focus, right? Like I loved music and all these things. Like that's where my brain was at the time. And I remember you handing me this parenting book and I was like, okay, like, I guess I'll read this. Like, okay, you know, so I got the audiobook because if I try to read anything, I'll fall asleep immediately. But I got the audiobook and I
hope we're not putting them to sleep right now.
No, of course not. So I was listening every day on the way home, you know, and I remember the takeaway from the book, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I was like, I don't know what to do with any of this, right? Like, that's nice. Like, what next, right? Like, I remember taking that away, and I didn't know how to, like, use any of it. And I think because you had the background and the training, right, you were able to take those pieces and like extract them.
Yeah. So I just want to be really clear, right? Like this is the point of the podcast where I'm supposed to tell you we figured it all out and our son magically like, you know, radically changed and poof, like everything was magical, but it wasn't. It was a journey and it was long and it was hard. And there were a lot of mistakes made by me, by Jason, by professionals that tried to help us. And so the good news is that we're 10 years later and I can tell you that there is hope, right? That the birds are chirping outside, literally, and that our kids are all playing nicely, have all enjoyed. And our son is about to graduate high school, and he hasn't had really any big incidents in school for quite a while.
Sure.
And so we'll fill in the gaps just a little bit, but I don't want to paint a false picture that it magically got better, because it didn't.
No.
It actually took a lot of, the very first thing was just connecting, just loving on him. And that's what this whole podcast is going to be about, is walking you through that journey, and also sharing the things that we discovered, and also bringing on experts that I'm still learning from. I still learn today, because if I stop learning, then I stop growing, and I don't want that.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of our jam, right? Like, we are learners, like lifelong learners. And like, our money's on you guys are too. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here listening or, you know, a part of our world.
Yeah.
Now, you say the end result is like, you know, everything's cool and successful, right? But I think you have to paint the picture of like, what does success look like, right? Yeah. Because like, he hasn't had any major incidents or like any like crazy aggression in the recent memory, right? But just last night, like, he definitely had like a very aggressive, like, I'm angry and processing emotions.
He definitely was yelling and processing. I mean, he's 17 years old, and he's about to go out into the quote unquote real world.
Yeah.
And that was really stressing him out. And it was the first time he was letting that out of his head. And so what has changed is really how we interact with him, and how he is able to, you know, communicate with us and know what he's struggling with and those sorts of things. And, you know, the reason I said that, it was because, like, I'm literally looking at our notes here, and it's like, tell the, like, it became beautiful part. And I'm like, no, it didn't magically become beautiful. I actually started sharing with other people online while it was crazy, crazy messy. While I thought I was alone, and while I thought I was a failure, that's when I started. And I started at our blog, Lemon Lime Adventures, because when I Googled things and looked for things to help my son, there was not near as much as there is nowadays. And everything that I did find was picture perfect. Everyone had the perfect homeschool room, and their kids were perfectly behaved, and they followed perfect chore charts. And if they did positive parenting, it just worked magically and beautifully. And I was like, I must not know jack. Like, what's wrong with me? And so I was really selfish when I started Lemon Lime Adventures. I really started it in hopes that I'd find one other human who was struggling the same way that we were struggling, and that could be that support system for me. I mean, that's really where it started.
Sure. And I think what I wanted to tie in, you know, the piece that was coming from me was just like, you get to define success. Mm-hmm. And as we figured out how to define success for our family, right, things started to really shift for us, you know, and in this situation where, like, you know, we have a 17-year-old who is like going through a life transition. He has a lot of feelings, and maybe like not a ton of like avenues that he feels comfortable in expressing those, right? Like, there was like a very like, like I'm blowing up moment, right? But it lasted 15, 20 minutes. You rode that storm. You reconnected almost immediately, if not even like no separation between the events.
I didn't. Yeah, it took maybe 10 minutes to go through from start to finish. And that would have lasted 5 hours. Right. And there would have been 3, you know, subsequent ones afterwards. And then days later, we still would have been trying to piece the pieces together.
Right, that ripple effect.
Right. There would have been a huge ripple effect. We would have ended up fighting. Whereas, like, when he walked in the door and he was like, oh, so what's he all upset about? And I was like, no. I just held it together. I was super calm, and I don't have anything left to then help you right now. So I will later, you know, and we have now been able to talk about it, and that we'll get into those details later.
Sure.
But really, I think when you say define success, and that's what I did with those 2 goals, is my number 1 goal was I don't want him to hate himself.
Yeah.
Right. And I believe that he is a 17-year-old who, you know, doesn't have a ton of friends, who has his first girlfriend, who is going like graduating high school. And I believe he likes himself quite a bit at this point.
I think so.
So I think that we can say, check, we met that goal. And goal number 2 of like him not blaming the world or hating the world, I think he's still navigating that right now. And I think he doesn't hate the world. He doesn't blame the world. He just still is trying to understand how to navigate the world. But he has me and he has Jason or you as a safe place. And that's the key. Is I wanted to make sure that he knew without a shadow of a doubt that he had one human who was never going to give up on him, who saw him for who he was, who saw the kid that nobody else saw. And that's my goal with this podcast too. Yeah. Because I believe if you're listening to this, you're that one parent, teacher, therapist. You're that one human for this challenging kid who other people see as a problem, other people see as disrespectful or rude or, and I think, right, that's the goal here is to help our kids love themselves and to help them be compassionate towards themselves so they can be compassionate towards others and know that they are not alone in this world. That's my like ultimate goal, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I feel like, as the 17-year-old kid who has gone through a tremendous journey, right, in the last probably like 15 but like it's pretty easy as a toddler, but the things he struggles with now are like typical things, right? Like he's just doing like human stuff, right? He's generalizing, he's distorting, he's deleting facts, right? Like that's like learning to be a human.
It's a lot of teenagers.
That's a lot of adults, right? So like this is like all pretty typical stuff. So it's much easier to navigate. 100%. I just wanted to jump because it's kind of like, this is where we are, this is where we came from, right? But there's a lot in between.
Yeah, which is the whole purpose of this podcast, is to talk about all the in between. And so really we're on a mission with this podcast is to just make sure that no other child has to feel like my child felt. No other parent has to feel like we felt. And we're on a mission to create a world that is way more accepting. And at this point, we have iterated the process. We've created a roadmap and a framework that works. And it didn't just work for our most challenging kid. It's works in our entire family. And it's worked with thousands and thousands of families around the world. And that is what we want to share with you, is what we've discovered and what we found over the years that really does work, that isn't just theory, it isn't just ideas, but it's really practical solutions and strategies. And this framework is something that's adaptable and personalized to your unique family. And then we have set it up in such a way that it meets you where you're at. So if you're in survival mode, you can still access it. And then if you're further along the journey and you've been learning strategies and you've been working with your family for a while, then it meets you there as well. So that's what I'm super excited about with this podcast. That's what I'm super excited about with creating resources for you guys. And I can't wait to get to know each and every one of you guys that are listening to this.
And what's amazing now, like, in the year 2023 is you can find a company like Calm the Chaos, right? You can find a company, that says, hey, look, we're not alone here, right? Like, come on, like, let's look at this very realistic, right? We're done with like the Pinterest perfect age, which is kind of amazing that like right now, as like a parent of a child who's struggling, you can go and find a support network, right? And that feels really great. Like, as a society that we've reached this point where it's not just about, like the dinners on the table when you get home and everything's vacuumed and perfect, like I think that that's really very exciting.
Yeah. And I think that that's just the biggest piece here is I want each and every one of you guys to know that you are not a failure. Your kid is not broken and you're not alone in this journey anymore. And so, I mean, I think that the purpose of episode 1 is really just to kind of share a little bit of our backstory, where we came from, why we do what we do. And over the next couple of episodes, we're going to be sharing a little bit more about some of the specific challenges and some more about the roadmap and this framework that we've discovered. And so we do hope that you will join us. We hope that you will share this. I mean, I think that's what we're supposed to say, right? Like, subscribe, and something like that. Is that a thing?
Sure, why not?
I don't know.
It doesn't have to be.
I'm so new to all this. You guys have to teach me.
We have to like point to the bell. Isn't that a thing? Yeah.
No, what?
Yeah, it's like in YouTube. I don't use YouTube. I don't know.
I don't know any of this stuff. We're getting schooled by all the youngins.
True story.
Okay. No, but for real.
For real, I think the thing that we're supposed to say is if you want to learn more about how to calm the chaos, right? You want to head over to calmthechaospodcast.com.
Yeah. And take that first step and let us know in the comments what you'd like to hear on this podcast and what has resonated with you today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Calm the Chaos Parenting Podcast. If you are listening in, I want you to know that you are not alone and that you are exactly the parent that your child needs. And finally, I want you to know that you have got this, and I'll see you in the next episode.